In this match, you will see Magnus Carlsen go from smiling to swearing as he enters the endgame. This is Danis Lazovic against Magnus Carlsen at the Chessable Masters 2024.
Magnus freestyles like he did in that first game of the day. Then I think Denis should play a bit more ambitiously in the opening, not necessarily try to trade off queens like we saw in that middle game earlier. In the meantime, repeat until this last move. It's the English opening, but a different branch this time. The 4 knights, and very similar with white fianchetting the bishop on g2, but Denis getting the black bishop to a much more active. Same, but different in this opening battle, Robert. And early days, but it looks like both players are well prepared.
The most accurate and strongest player, but you need to conserve some of that time. Otherwise, even if you get an even position, you may still collapse. So what do you make of this opening? Do you like Denis's play thus far? And do you like Magnus's decision to just slightly change the move order and the variation?
It was so convincing what happened in game one. And that can also be psychologically difficult for a Denis because it's the same opening, but it's different side variation of it, a very similar structure that we see. And Denis is the one who has to switch it up. He plays Magnus's trademark move, as David has told us, with that a-pawn moving forward. The bishop was attacked, the bishop falls back. We're expecting a trade on e3, but this is interesting because whoever blinks with this tension, with the dark squared bishop, there are repercussions on the pawn structure. If white was to take on b6 right now, black ends up with a double pawn, but in return gets an open c line. Eventually will push that a pawn to a4.
It's always a question of whether you can stand the tension. Magnus cannot. He trades. I was going to say, try and wait. Do it on your own terms. Force the opponent to spend their move capturing. But, of course, when changes of pawn structure are involved, but a little bit of pressure, at least psychologically, on Denis. Bishop to d5, though, very quick idea. And kind of ruling out that motif I mentioned, queen to b5 now, would end up on a vulnerable square once the black bishop trades off for the white knight. Black's knight actually has a beautiful post in the middle of the board and highlighted there, knight to d4. So beware, this is getting tactical, this is getting sharp.
Once the bishop moves out of the path, the d3 pawn can be captured. And look at Denis. He's not just grabbing a pawn because he can. It wasn't the computer accurate move. I'm going to take that question mark away if I can. I don't believe that's a question mark. Perhaps take on f3 under more favorable circumstances because the series of trades may still be acceptable for black. So it's an even game, Tanya. I think that Denis, he has done everything right thus far, but these b pawns, that's the long-term issue.
That last move, rook c3, defends the d3 pawn that you were earlier highlighting. White is also eyeing to get the rook from f1, double up on the c line, trying to get more control of the only open c file.
Well, how is white going to attack anything? I'm looking at some point to make a move like d4, as Magnus does double his rooks. I think that is the smart play. But as Tanya and you, David, were saying earlier, that if black can successfully play bishop c6 and start mobilizing the b pawn, I don't think that you're too unhappy about your position. So it's a game of nuance. It's a game of tempo. And for Magnus Carlsen, he properly assessed that he can successfully get his rooks in line with one another. And wow, Denis gives up the c file. Are you shocked by that at all, Tanya? Because he is playing natural-looking moves, but now the open file is white's.
And the point is, it's going to be black's pawns on the queen side that are going to start pushing and try and create weakness. One set of pawns get traded, and the ones that you're drawing arrows on, if white is left with that b2 pawn, it becomes a clear target. And it will not be the only one. The principle of two weaknesses. White already has a weakness on d3. Denis trying to create another one. b4 is a threat that Magnus now has to watch out for. And I think the fact that he paused and took a think, Magnus isn't feeling very comfortable with his position anymore, David.
d4 doesn't actually carry a next move threat because of the pins along the d-file, and that's exactly why Magnus steps his queen on over to e1. b4, to my eyes, it feels automatic.
On with his queen to put pressure on that second weakness that we were talking about, but he goes for it. Is he thinking about going queen takes pawn? Whoa! An intermezzo. He wants to capture it with a piece, jumps in with a knight, and I see both of you. You're as surprised as I am.
With a knight, and Magnus might have to take drastic measures. We saw Magnus shaking his head on the camera. He goes for it, sacrifices a rook for bishop, and Denis raises his eyebrows, double exclamation mark. Now it's Magnus smiling. What's happening here? Some mind games at work. After this rook is captured, white will take a pawn on a5. White will have 2 pawns and a bishop for a rook, level material. but so many open lines, you would tend to think that a rook would thrive. Robert, it's suddenly got chaotic. Magnus, what do you make of his reaction?
He's just laughing, but I think he's laughing because he overlooked Black's play, and then he felt fortunate that he had rook takes c6, because this does muddy the waters. Objectively, it was the best decision. We saw it given the brilliant move, Glyph, and it was a brilliant decision, but I think it's because Denis Lazovic.
Totally. I 100% agree. The tables have totally turned since the first game of today. Magnus is way behind on the clock. Look at the evaluation bar slipping as well. The margin for error for Magnus is tiny. Denis is just playing amazing chess right now. Brilliantly, just to make a draw here. Look at Denis closing in. The blue arrow gave it away. That was Black's best move. He's zeroed in. He's going to capture that weak white d-pawn we've been talking about for a long, long time. Maybe even now, that pawn could just be snapped off the board. The black queen doesn't necessarily need to capture yet. It would also cost the e-pawn in the near future.
Hoover off all those pawns, then suddenly you feel better with just pawns on one side of the board.
It's so tough, right? It's a retreating move. You're not taking on e5, but of course it's Magnus Carlsen, and of course he finds the best move. You've got ideas of rook jumping onto d1, at some moment the knight jumping onto d3. Meanwhile, Denis has picked up one pawn and not given any of his.
Well, those same mental exercise that Magnus was doing.
Also, there are so many other tempting moves. You can push that pawn to e4, just cement it. I guess you can move the black rook. You move the black queen. The knight jumps in instead. Also, a really nice move. Your white knight. So Magnus now forced to push a pawn to b3, but the bar only drops further. And now the idea of queen to f3 makes much more sense than it did earlier, because you hit f2. You can close in, move in for the kill. The white king is a sitting duck.
I want to hear it from chat, and I want to hear it from you guys. Given this position, both players under 2 minutes. Denis Lazovic plays queen f3. What are the chances of Magnus saving this?
I don't know what number to put it, but I'd say more likely that he wins than Magnus holds. And knight c1. What is this?
Black's best move by far is to retreat the black queen. And queen exchange, actually white would potentially be saved, but he finds the best move.
But he just outplayed Magnus Carlsen in this game. And excuse me, is that not a free knight? Isn't Denis Lazovic about to be up an entire rook?
I am mind-freaking blown right now. He does pick up that knight. It is an entire rook. It all is down to that a-pawn.
He's scratching. He's kind of feeling the tense. Wow, the stakes here. Queen to d5, walking into a light square diagonal, but covering the promotion square. I like it, Robert. To get through, though.
Magnus would love to play bishop g2, but it walks into checkmate. So he first pushes pawn to a7. Now, the good news is one square away from promotion. The bad news, it's easier to team up on, and it can't be defended by a light square bishop. So queen b5, the plan is clear for Magnus. For Denis Lazovic, he's in huge time trouble. In fact, the engine is heading back towards the center. Queen d8, an inaccurate choice here. Really challenging for him to survive. And the f7 pawn, that's a big problem.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, this is turning. He gives up the black knight. He offers it as bait to try and deflect the white queen. Double exclamation mark. Queen takes knight. Black will remove that white a7 pawn, and black will win this game.
Bishop c4, you don't take the knight, you don't give up your key pawn, a7, but now there's a double threat. The knight on b3 is hanging the pawn on f7. Denis says, you can take a pawn on f7, it's only a check. My king is super safe on h8. There are no more checks to follow. And now the c pawn can start moving forward. Is bishop d5 an idea? But the point is that black will capture the a7 pawn, eventually capture that bishop on d5. So bishop d5 is not a resource for white, Robert, here. He's trying to put pressure, but Denis still in driver's seat.
This pawn needed to be on e4. The bishop needs to safely hit d5, but as you said, the rook will distract the queen. Magnus himself, now he's at 10 seconds. He also is seeing a passed pawn run up the board. Bishop g6, it makes a mating net around the black king. But look at Denis go. It's the white king that isn't safe either, and black's passed pawn is just as dangerous as white's.
Denis is winning. He knows he's winning. It's only the clock that can stop him now. Magnus at 1 second. He moves his queen, but now a check. Surely Denis has got this in the bag. He just needs to get rid of that white a-pawn, and he's going to do it. He's going to win this game. He's going to beat Magnus Carlsen. Stop him now, surely.
Denis is seconds away from what is the biggest win of his career, but watch out, there is a checkmate in one. How do you fight it? Do you push the g-pawn? Do you slide up with your king? He does it. He is fighting it, but he still needs to be careful. Magnus is not going to let this be easy.
There's so many checks against that black king. There are no pawns in front of it. And here comes another mating net. The queen can slide back to h7 at any moment, but he's ready to take this pawn on e6. Perfect defense from Dennis.
Wow.
Amazing defense. Look how he's organized himself. The black queen now defending the king. The black rook on a nice safe square. The black knight is defended as well. Magnus swearing. Magnus cursing his luck here. He knows Dennis has done perfectly. And he's about to lose with white Magnus. This nearly never happens. The pawn drops. Magnus resigns. Dennis takes a historic victory.